Part 2. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 11. In the Red Alert World, Wang Ling couldn't hear Uncle Hei's voice, so he simply calmed down and took the time to regain his strength. The rest time given to them by the instructor was not too short this time. When they gathered again, Wang Ling had some strength to move around. However, this was not enough. The next project turned out to be Wang Ling's impression of the Chinese Army's single and parallel bars moves. This sport exercises the strength and coordination of the whole body. If Wang Ling had memorized the movements in normal times, he would have been able to complete it, but now, it was really difficult for others. Of course, he was not the only one who was stumped. Many of his other comrades who were training together also had bitter expressions on their faces. But the instructor didn't care about this at all. He personally demonstrated a set of standard movements, and then assigned people one by one to start the training. During the exercise, this group of people often made fools of themselves and their movements were not standard. However, many people failed to hold on firmly and fell directly from the horizontal and parallel bars. Among them, Wang Ling was naturally included. Those actions seemed simple, but with Wang Ling's current physical condition, it was too difficult to complete them. But the instructor insisted on this matter and everyone had to grit their teeth and complete a set of standard movements before they were allowed to let go, and Wang Ling was not immune. On the horizontal and parallel bars, Wang Ling fell countless times. It took him more than half an hour to complete this exercise alone. On the training ground, there were not many horizontal and parallel bars. The 5th Company's training for this sport was completed, and the world of Red Alert was already declining. This hard day's training was finally over. When the 5th Company gathered together, it looked a little funny on the surface. Many people had bruises and swollen faces. Wang Ling knew it was okay, but he didn't fall on his face, but there were many bruises on his body. After a few slogans, the team finally disbanded and went to the canteen. But Wang Ling was now exhausted, dizzy and nauseous, and had no appetite for food, so he simply returned to the tent alone. At the end of the day's training, Wang Ling was really fed up with the environment here. He was about to contact Uncle Hei to leave, but suddenly there was a series of footsteps outside the tent, and then someone walked in. Wang Ling took a closer look, and it turned out to be his devil instructor. Seeing this instructor, Wang Ling was startled, fearing that something else would happen to him. However, this time the instructor was really not here to embarrass him. He smiled and pressed his hand. "Don't be nervous. Just sit down wherever you want. I'm not here to show you the dignity of an instructor." Wang Ling glanced at him suspiciously, but did not refuse. He sat on the bed unnaturally and said nothing. The instructor also found a place to sit down and looked around at the situation in the tent. Wang Ling also took the opportunity to observe the instructor. According to Uncle Hei's settings, the instructor was a Chinese, with short curly hair and a thin camouflage military uniform, which outlined his strong body. The instructor's eyes were as resolute and sharp as his face. He glanced at the tent, then looked at Wang Ling with a smile and asked, "Kid, what's your name?" After all, there are too many people training, and he can only remember code names, etc. It all depends on personal interests. Wang Ling didn't hesitate and answered his name immediately. The instructor nodded and asked, "Wang Ling, kid, do you know that just because of the running event in the morning training, you are among the entire recruit team, a unique nickname?" "I know. The worst in the whole army." Wang Ling looked a little sad. He heard this title during lunch. How could he feel better about being given such a title? But the instructor didn't seem to care at all. He changed his cruelty during the day and smiled very kindly and confidently. "Kid, do you care about this title?" Wang Ling remained silent, but the instructor said, "Haha, actually, according to my standards and your physical ability, I kicked you out of the military camp after running, but do you know why I kept you? I don't know, Wang Ling replied with a frown. The instructor snorted, his expression quickly became serious, and he said earnestly, you are in poor physical condition, but you have extraordinary perseverance. This world will not sympathize with the weak, but it will respect everyone who works hard. With this kind of perseverance, the worst in the army will one day become the strongest in the army. I firmly believe this. The strongest in the whole army. Wang Ling muttered these words and couldn't help but tremble in his heart. Before he could ask any more questions, the instructor had already stood up and was about to leave. However, when the instructor was about to walk out of the tent, he paused again, turned around and said to Wang Ling, that's right, kid, I punished you by running 5 kilometers during the morning training, but you didn't remember that you ran at that time. How far is it? In fact, by the time you were semi-conscious, you had already run a full 6 kilometers. After saying that, the instructor finally walked out of the tent without any explanation. He left, but Wang Ling was confused. What kind of situation is this, a full 6 kilometers? Wasn't it promised to be 5 kilometers? Why didn't you stop me at the end and let me run an extra kilometer? The others were not punished and only ran 3 kilometers. Wang Ling was better here, twice as much as the others. Wang Ling found it difficult to accept this comparison for a while. It happened that at this time, Uncle He asked again, boy, are you planning to come back to settle the score with me? After spending this time together, Uncle He already understood Wang Ling's temperament. Sure enough, as soon as he heard the sound, Wang Ling calmed down, gritted his teeth and answered in his head, that's right, let me go back. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a sudden change in Wang Ling's mind, and then he returned to the transfer station of the different dimensional system, and Uncle He still looked at Wang Ling with that playful smile. But Wang Ling was not happy anymore. Hey, Uncle He, after all this fuss, the gift you mentioned is 6 kilometers long. Uncle He is also quite thick-skinned, the instructor only arranged 5 kilometers for you. You ran the extra mile yourself. No one is to blame. You. Wang Ling was speechless for a while, and after being depressed for a long time, he complained, why didn't you stop me after running enough? Uncle He disagreed, why did you stop me? I'm so tired after 1 kilometer. 5 kilometers will kill me. After 6 kilometers, do you think I've become like a bear? Wang Ling asked angrily. Ha ha ha, Uncle He had laughed enough. Boy, without this experience, would you believe that you could run 6 kilometers in one go? Wang Ling answered matter-of-factly, I don't believe it even if I kill you. Uncle He added, that's okay. During the recruit training, you are allowed to grow to the limit. As long as you don't run to death and run for a while, there will be no harm. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 12. Chapter 12, Lost Again. Even so, Wang Ling was still a little angry and felt like he was being tricked. Uncle He said again, if you want to say you are tired, your instructor is much more tired than you. He has been running with you the whole way. You are running 6 kilometers, and he is also 6 kilometers, and he is pushing you all the way. At this point, Wang Ling was finally speechless. Thinking of the sound of whipping that sounded in his ears almost the whole time when he was being tortured, he felt a little ashamed in his heart. The instructor's earnest words appeared in his mind involuntarily. After being silent for a while, Wang Ling finally figured it out, shook his head and said, forget it, Uncle He, let me go back to the real world. Uncle He didn't say anything more. As soon as he finished speaking, Wang Ling felt his eyes go dark. When he opened his eyes again, he was already lying on the bed in the dormitory. Returning to the real world, Wang Ling took a few breaths and wanted to get up and drink some water. But as soon as he moved, all the muscles in his body seemed to protest, and waves of soreness came over him, making Wang Ling couldn't help but groan. Stand up. The half-day training in the red alert world once again successfully drained his physical energy. Now Wang Ling is weak again. This situation made Wang Ling couldn't help but laugh a few times, and simply stayed lazy and lay on the bed. Looking blankly at the bedboard on the upper bunk, Wang Ling was still thinking about what the instructor had just said not long ago, and felt a little mixed in his heart. It happened that at this time, Uncle Hay's voice came out in his mind again. This time in the red alert world, you stayed for nearly 7 hours in total. The unconscious state in sleep was 1 hour. After subtracting it, you gained a total of 6 points. 7 hours, Wang Ling muttered, then turned on his phone and looked at it, only to find that only more than 40 minutes had passed in reality. This difference in time made Wang Ling couldn't help but marvel. As for the 6 points, Wang Ling responded almost without thinking, "Uncle Hay, all points can be converted into cash." Uncle Hay was speechless for a while, and then he said after a while, "I still recommend that you accumulate points and redeem them for boosters as soon as possible, otherwise I'm afraid you will be exhausted every time you train." Wang Ling is also a bachelor. I don't care about that. At worst, I can go back to the real world to rest. It's really unambitious. No matter how ambitious you are, you still have to eat, right? Uncle Hay, stop inking. With such a cheap owner at the stall, Uncle Hay was probably depressed for a long time. He didn't want to say anything more and just handed over the money silently. After receiving the remittance text message, Wang Ling gave up and even replied in his head, "Thank you, Uncle Hay." Uncle Hay was completely speechless. What he regrets most now may be that the system gave other people's thoughts and emotions. In the real world, it was still early morning, but Wang Ling had been busy in the red alert world for most of the day, draining all his energy. He was so tired that he simply fell asleep again. After gradually accepting the different dimensional system, Wang Ling's sleep quality became better and better. After closing his eyes, he heard gentle snoring soon. When he woke up again, it was already around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. After getting up, Wang Ling was still confused, but his stomach was already protesting. After rubbing his belly, Wang Ling stretched. After getting up, he washed his face casually and went to the school cafeteria. Having just received 600 yuan in cash, Wang Ling had a luxurious meal, and rarely bought some delicacies that he would normally be reluctant to eat. After finding a separate dining table and sitting down, while eating, he still sighed in his mind, "Uncle Hay, look at the game you set up, the food is not as good as our school." Faced with this accusation, Uncle Hay was also full of helplessness and simply continued to remain silent in response. After complaining for a few times, Wang Ling felt bored, yawned, and changed the topic. "The time difference between inside and outside the system is too big. Going back and forth, I feel that my biological clock is a little messed up." This time, Uncle Hay was finally willing to speak. "This is because you haven't gotten used to it yet. When you do it more often, you will figure out a pattern that suits you." "How many more times? Do you have to be so tired every time?" Wang Ling complained and raised his arm. The feeling of pain and fatigue made him feel bitter again. Uncle Hay replied, "I have said that there are no shortcuts on the way to becoming stronger. If there is a shortcut, it can only be done by yourself. You have to save enough points and use enhancers." I know, Wang Ling responded casually and didn't want to say any more. He may not have noticed that during the conversation with Uncle Hay, there were many things he said that he actually couldn't help but say. As a result, several female students dining at the table next to him saw them and suddenly became a little lively. "Look, who is he talking to? There is no one across from him. Could it be? Bah! You want to talk to ghosts? Go ahead and think about it all day long. Let me see, he should be wearing a Bluetooth headset and chatting with someone via voice while eating. Is it so romantic? I don't believe it. How about making a bet and walking around to see if he has any? Dot. The cafeteria is spacious enough, but at this time, there are not many students dining. In the end, Wang Ling still heard their conversation, but he had no choice but to speed up a little. After eating, he left a cold figure behind and walked away. In this situation, if his roommates met, they would probably use it to strike up a conversation, but Wang Ling didn't have this awareness in his mind. According to the old saying, he is single based on his strength. After leaving the cafeteria, Wang Ling immediately went to the teaching building and found the classroom. In the second period this afternoon, their major still had courses. In the classroom, there were also more than 10 people waiting, and 2 of Wang Ling's 3 unreliable roommates also showed up. Zhang Shenke patted him on the shoulder out of habit. Wang Ling grimaced in pain and almost fell to his seat. Zhang Shenke looked confused and said, "Wang Ling, why are you weak again?" Dongfang Yuking smiled, "I must be masturbating. And from the looks of it, I was masturbating a lot." Wang Ling was speechless, but it was Zhang Sheng who shouted, "Even if there is no one else in our dormitory, you can't indulge yourself like this. You will be wiped out by force." "Ah, what the hell, I trained myself." Wang Ling glared at the 2 of them and quickly defended himself. Normally, this would have been a joke, but now there are so many girls in the classroom, and Wang Ling also wants to save face. And this sentence, strictly speaking, is not a lie. As for these 2 unreliable ones, they all showed "I understand" expressions, started joking one after another, and waited until the teacher arrived before giving up. Like Wang Ling, the 2 of them only brought their mobile phones to class. They didn't even have textbooks, paper, or pens, and they waited until get out of class was over before completing the task. After wandering around casually, the 3 of them had dinner together, but the 2 guys did not leave school after dinner. It was rare for them to sleep in the dormitory for a night, but the reason was a bit strange. They said they wanted to supervise Wang Ling and stop harming himself. Wang Ling couldn't do anything to them. There was no one else anyway, so whatever they said was what they said. Wang Ling was used to being alone, and suddenly having 2 guys to accompany him made Wang Ling happy. Regardless of how exhausted he was that night, he just played games with them until 3 in the morning before falling asleep. When he woke up during the day, Zhang Shenke had already gone to the work unit, and Dongfang Yuking was still sleeping in. When the guy woke up, it was already past 11 in the morning. After casually washing up, the 2 had lunch together, and then Dongfang Yuking also left the school. Only Wang Ling was left in the 4-person room. Fortunately, he has gotten used to it and doesn't take it too seriously, and his life has returned to its original track. Time passed quickly, and before I knew it, 5 days had passed since the last time I entered the different dimensional system. During this period of time, Wang Ling's body finally recovered and he tried to move around. Wang Ling could clearly feel that his body strength had been significantly strengthened compared to before, which made him feel a little surprised and confident. Now, it's time to enter the world of Red Alert again. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 13. Uncle Hey. After having this idea, Wang Ling immediately called out in his head. As an artificial intelligence brain, Uncle Hey didn't need any rest time, so he immediately responded with a self-deprecating look, "Hey, boy, do you think of a virtual guy like me?" Wang Ling giggled, "What do you mean by remembering it? I have never forgotten it." After joking, Wang Ling checked the time, it was nearly 10 in the morning, and then said, "Okay, Uncle Hey, I won't say much else, just let me enter the system." As soon as he finished speaking, Wang Ling's eyes went dark. When he opened his eyes again, he was already at the transfer station of the different dimensional system. This was the third time he came to this place. Wang Ling was already familiar with it. He moved his hands and feet and gave the order without waiting for Uncle He to speak, "Open the door, Uncle He." Uncle He didn't do any ink, so he snapped his fingers and the door to the red alert world opened immediately. Wang Ling greeted Uncle He and walked in directly. When he came to the red alert world again, the time was connected to the time he left last time. The other officers and soldiers were eating dinner in the cafeteria, but Wang Ling stayed alone in the tent to rest. The last time he came out, he was so tired that he collapsed, but now that he had rested for so long in the real world, Wang Ling could be said to be resurrected with full blood and energy. After stretching, he walked out of the tent directly. Outside the tent, most of the recruits were dining, but there were also some conscripts on duty patrolling, and some faster-moving recruits had finished their meals and were now hanging out in small groups. Wang Ling's appearance happened to attract the attention of these people. Among them, a group of bored recruits came over with their teeth picked and started laughing. "Look, isn't that who it is? I'm very impressed. The whole army is famous. What do I remember? Number 101 of the 5th Recruit Company, known as the worst one in the entire army. Ha ha ha." Listening to their ridicule, Wang Ling clenched his fists and stared back. "What do you mean? Wherever there are people, there is society, and even this red alert world is no exception. With a large number of soldiers, it is inevitable that there will be some who are arrogant and look down on others." This happened to be what Wang Ling encountered. When they heard Wang Ling's question, they glanced at each other, and then laughed again. The first person answered, "What else do you mean? I just came to see you, the worst in the army. What's wrong? You're exhausted. I can't even eat. Why are you here watching the scenery by yourself?" These words were full of provocation. Wang Ling felt uncomfortable after hearing this. He gritted his teeth and asked, "Do you want to fight? It's useless to reason with such a ruffian. Hey, this guy is not very capable and has a bad temper." The leader of the other party was a little surprised by Wang Ling's attitude. "Since you have already proposed a fight, I will be sorry if I don't give you a good beating. Remember, you brat. Yes, the person who hit you is No. 099 of the 1st Recruit Company. Don't find him when you retaliate in the future. Brothers, teach him a lesson." After saying that, without waiting for Wang Ling's reaction, the 5 people immediately swarmed up and beat Wang Ling. In the past, Wang Ling might not have dared to fight back at all, but after several consecutive trainings, Wang Ling's mentality began to slowly change, and he also had some anger in his heart, so he simply released it here. Even if there were 5 people opposite him, he was not discouraged. He clenched his fists and started smashing them randomly, and the 6 people fought together on the spot. Hey, what are you doing? Good guy, the 1st Recruit Company is awesome, they bullied us. Brothers, don't be afraid, come on. It happened that at this time, 7 or 8 members of the 5th Recruit Company who had finished their meal returned. When they saw this scene, they became angry on the spot. A group of people joined the battle circle with shouts and punches and kicks. The scene was it immediately became out of control. They had no scruples at all when fighting in groups, and they started fighting in public, which naturally attracted a lot of new recruits who were up to no good. However, this group of people did not take it too seriously to watch the excitement. Instead of stopping it, they started shouting and encouraging, making the scene even more lively. The mobilization soldiers who were on duty naturally noticed it, but they did not stop it at all. Instead, they watched from a short distance away. When the excitement reached a certain level, the instructors were finally alerted. When the instructor of Wang Ling's 5th Recruit Company recognized one of his own, his face immediately darkened. He grabbed a conscript's submachine gun and fired it into the air. 3 shots were fired, and the loud noise immediately suppressed all the sounds. The dozen or so people who were fighting together were also frightened, and immediately let go of their hands, automatically dividing into two opposing parties. At this time, the fifth instructor walked up with an angry smile. Okay. Okay. Each one of them is really promising. They are actually fighting in groups in the dignified military camp. Do you have enough to eat? Wang Ling and others knew how scary this instructor was. After being reprimanded, they hurriedly stood up and started training. However, the troublemakers in the first recruit company all looked at them with playful smiles. As for the fifth instructor, after scolding the soldiers he had trained, he turned to look at the troublemakers. You are from the first recruit company, right? How interesting. Why did my soldiers provoke you? Are you here to fight when you have nothing to do? If you really have nothing to do, why are you running around in circles? You. After hearing this, No 099 of the other party immediately got a little angry and wanted to refute, but the instructor of the first recruit company also arrived in time and suppressed him when he spoke. I said, Lao Wu, my soldier, it seems like it's not your turn to teach me a lesson, right? The fifth instructor was not to be outdone. Lao Yi, your soldiers fought with my soldiers. It's good that I didn't fight them. I can't even discipline them for you. Are you being too protective? The first instructor also knew the quality of his soldiers and was too lazy to argue with him. He turned to look at 099 and the others, snorted coldly and said, it's shameful to leave it here, go back. Yes. No 099 was also afraid of his instructor, so he quickly responded after hearing this. However, before leaving, he alone extended his thumb downward to Wang Ling. The worst in the whole army is the worst in the whole army, the one who can't stand up. Remember the one who beat you today, No 099 of the first recruit company, I'm waiting for your revenge at any time. After saying that, the guy laughed and finally left with the others. But the fifth recruit company was furious. This face is so stinky. Isn't it because they came here a while before us? It's so arrogant to run wild on our territory. Seize the opportunity and really want to beat them up. While they were muttering, the instructor had already returned the submachine gun, walked up to them and snorted, look at what you are like now, I feel embarrassed. After Wang Ling and the others heard this, they immediately showed ashamed expressions, but no one dared to move. In this group fight, there were only 5 people in the first recruit company, but there were nearly 10 of them. But in the end, they failed to defeat those 5 people. Now, many of their faces have some bruises. Wang Ling, even there are even black circles under my eyes, and it hurts even when I blink. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 14. Let me tell you, this matter is not over yet. After staring at them for a while, the instructor said angrily, go back and rest. We will meet at the training ground in half an hour. Disband. With a cold snort, the instructor turned and walked away. But Wang Ling and the others all had grim faces, feeling as much aggrieved as they could. Are we in trouble? The instructor is going to torture us all night. Definitely. With so many people watching, he can't keep it off his face. But, when 101 is bullied, we can't just watch from the sidelines, right? There is nothing we can do. We accept this punishment. During this process, Wang Ling did not interrupt, but listening to their conversation, Wang Ling felt a warm feeling in his heart. This is obviously a virtual red alert world, but everything he sees and hears here seems to be real. For a while, Wang Ling couldn't tell whether these comrades were virtual programs or real people. As for Ye Lian's punishment, it was exactly what those comrades said. Wang Ling could only accept it. Who said that this incident was caused by him? The news of the night training quickly spread throughout the entire 5th Recruit Company, but to Wang Ling's expectation, no one in the entire company complained. Instead, They all returned to the tent as soon as possible and took the time to recover their physical fitness. Wang Ling collapsed twice, but fortunately he had the buffer of the real world. Apart from being beaten up, his physical strength was quite sufficient. During the break, half an hour passed quickly. The instructor sounded the assembly slogan on time. The entire 5th Recruit Company assembled within 10 seconds and stood on the training ground. Their movements were not small, and it was difficult for other companies not to notice them. They were all a little surprised for a while, but a group of people in the 1st Recruit Company, headed by No 099, were a little disdainful. Look, the people from the 5th Company are, how pitiful. If you lose the fight, you have to be trained at night. Others were also somewhat gloating about the misfortune, and even some were laughing. But Wang Ling and his 5th Recruit Company could not hear this at all. After the gathering, under the leadership of the instructor, a group of people had already ran to the gravel runway and maintained a straddle position. At this time, the instructor began to lecture. Do you know what it means to gather you all in the middle of the night? No. The entire company quickly replied, isn't it just a punishment? They have been prepared for it. But the instructor scolded, you know nothing. Today after dinner, someone in our company got into a fight with someone from the 1st Recruit Company. This happened. Finally, the instructor pointed out this matter. After hearing this, Wang Ling and others felt a little scared, fearing that they would be targeted by the instructor. But, well done, the development of the matter was somewhat beyond their expectations. The instructor's words turned out to be words of praise, which made the entire company couldn't help but widen their eyes. Immediately afterwards, the instructor began to lecture again, those who do not fight back after being beaten are cowards. I do not accept cowards in my team. As a man, you must stay rational, but you must also be bloody. The country has no bloody spirit. Will only be bullied. If a soldier has no blood, he cannot win any battle. If a man has no blood, he is a coward. These words were so deafening to Wang Ling's ears that he was stunned for a moment. I got into a fight tonight when my brain got hot, and in the end, I got this lecture from the instructor. However, after being stunned, Wang Ling also figured out that this was a military camp during the war, and soldiers were trained, not obedient children. In the real world, Wang Ling has also heard that in the army, soldiers of different establishments often fight when they meet together. However, the army, which is usually known for its strict discipline, has very light punishment for this, or even no punishment at all. Although this is a red alert world, this rule obviously applies. But, listening to the instructor's words, many people in the 5th Recruit Company were happy and excited. But after the praise was finished, the instructor immediately made a big turn, causing these people's eyebrows to droop again. After glaring at the team, the instructor scolded, you actually lost. There are nearly 10 of us here, and the 1st Recruit Company only has 5, which is nearly double the number, and you actually lost. Look at what you look like. You have a bruised nose and a swollen face. Do you know how embarrassing it is? I even wonder if your legs will be broken if I stop you too late. It turned out that after working on it for a long time, the instructor was angry about this matter. After hearing this, Wang Ling and others who participated in the group fight lowered their heads involuntarily. The result of tonight's fight was indeed embarrassing. What about you? Lift your heads. The instructor was paying attention to them all the time. When he saw them lowering their heads, he immediately roared. When they raised their heads, he scolded them again. The 1st Recruit Company is 1 month ahead of you, isn't it? I will lose, and I can't afford to lose this person. So, starting from today, I will practice military marching boxing for an extra 2 hours every night to strengthen my fighting training. Finally, the instructor revealed his punishment measures. After a tiring day, they had to work overtime at night. This was indeed a big burden for Wang Ling and the others, but they had nothing to say. I don't have high demands on you. Before you actually join the battlefield, get rid of the first recruit company. Do you have the confidence to fulfill this request? Have. Speak louder and your dinner will be free. Yes. 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 At first, the team's response was a bit perfunctory, but after being stimulated, the 3 yeses in a row became louder and louder than the last. 3 shouts, just like 3 promises, an unknown fire quietly burning in the hearts of every 5th recruit company soldier. This request, to be honest, sounds somewhat unreasonable, but in this barracks, it is not surprising at all. After successfully arousing the enthusiasm of the soldiers, the instructor nodded with satisfaction. Before the training begins, we will warm up together for 2 kilometers. Everyone, turn right. Run and walk. At the beginning, Wang Ling was startled when he heard the 2-kilometer warm-up, but he was relieved when he started running. The team was jogging together. After 2 kilometers, although he was still out of breath, it was not too much for him to bear. Afterwards, the teams lined up, with the instructor demonstrating in front, and the whole company followed suit, waving their fists and feet, and shouting loudly, spreading throughout the entire training ground. Drops of sweat fell on the red ground, making a loud sound. The practice of Zhengzhenkan is not easy. The instructor has a very sharp eye. During the practice, if anyone hesitates or the movements are not standard or strong enough, he will point it out and teach you step by step. After 2 hours of practice, the 5th almost everyone in the recruit company was tired. After the gathering was dismissed, the group of people dragged their tired bodies back to the tent and took the remaining time to wash up. After working hard for a while, they finally all lay down on their own beds and fell asleep. Relatively speaking, Wang Ling's place is better. Everyone else has been working hard all day, but Wang Ling left twice in the middle. He has already accumulated enough energy in the real world. Although he is tired now, he is not ready to work immediately. To the point of falling asleep. At this time, Uncle He finally spoke. "Boy, are you still used to the atmosphere in this team?" Wang Ling shook his head and answered truthfully, "I don't know. Sometimes I feel very uncomfortable. I just want to end it quickly and leave early. But sometimes I feel like I like this atmosphere. Every comrade is very cute. It's magical here na." Maybe even Wang Ling himself didn't notice that after entering the red alert world several times in succession, his mentality has changed too much. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 15. Ha ha ha. Although Uncle He is an artificial intelligence brain, he also thinks like a human and naturally has various emotions. After hearing Wang Ling's comment, he smiled heartily. After laughing, Uncle He asked again, "How's it going, kid? Are you coming back?" Originally, Wang Ling was going to return to the real world after the training, but when he touched the scars on his face, he felt as if he was too embarrassed to go back. He simply shook his head. "Forget it, there are no classes today anyway, and the 3 of them have a stake. I won't come back either, just stay here for a few more days." "Okay, I won't disturb you anymore, just go to sleep." "Good night, Uncle Black. I am an artificial intelligence brain and I don't need to rest." After talking in his mind for a while, there was finally no movement from Uncle He. Wang Ling took a deep breath, lay on his side and looked at his sleeping comrades, smiled involuntarily, and then closed his eyes again. Fell into sleep not long after. In the instructor's camp, when the first instructor saw the 5th instructor returning, he asked in a sinister tone, "Lao Wu, do you expect to be able to come back after training in the middle of the night?" They are also old comrades in arms, and they are very familiar with each other, but they don't usually deal with each other, and they compete everywhere. Not to be outdone, the 5th instructor snorted and said, "It's not my character not to fight back after being hit. Just wait, Sooner or later, this punch will hit you in the face. The first instructor clicked his tongue and said, "Fifth, it's not that I look down on you, but you joined the army a full month later than us. This month's training cannot be made up by working overtime. What can you do to fight us? TCH, let's wait and see." After the fifth instructor finished speaking, he didn't bother to argue anymore. Drop. 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 Early the next morning, Wang Ling was sleeping soundly, but was suddenly awakened by 3 consecutive bugles. While he was confused, he heard their instructor shouting outside, "Gather in 30 seconds, don't let me say the second one all over." Upon hearing this voice, not only Wang Ling, but also the entire 5th Company's soldiers were startled, and then they immediately woke up and hurriedly cleaned up, as if they had been given a shot of chicken blood. Wang Ling was also among them. He didn't like this rush feeling, but after all, he had experienced it once. Wang Ling did not fall behind, and he was worthy of joining the army in the last few seconds. This time, no one was late again. And the next time, it was time for their morning run. There are some special rules for morning running here. The mileage is determined according to the time when the recruits joined the army. The first company of recruits now has to run 3 kilometers every morning, but the 5th company only has to run 1 kilometer. It will take time to slowly run in the future. Add it. However, since the confrontation with the first company yesterday, the instructor's requirements for Wang Ling and the others have also been raised to a higher level. They have directly targeted the first company and increased the task to 3 kilometers. When Wang Ling heard this number, his legs felt a little weak on the spot, but when he thought about what he promised the instructor yesterday, he gritted his teeth and persisted. Originally, Wang Ling completely collapsed after just 1 kilometer of the school physical fitness test. However, after these days of exercise, his physical fitness has increased, and his toughness and patience have also made great progress. After running 3 kilometers in the morning, he was still tired and dizzy. It was dazzling, but I still persisted and did not fall behind. Even the devil instructor couldn't help but raise the corners of his mouth when he saw this comparison. After a few slogans were shouted, the team dispersed for dinner. After a while of rest, the whole day of training began again. Yesterday, Wang Lingshang needed a buffer in the real world to survive that day's training, but today he relied on tenacity and gritted his teeth to persevere all day long. Although he collapsed several times in the middle, he still managed to survive. He never returned to the real world once, and even Uncle Hay in the system transfer station was amazed. Finally, it was late at night. After 2 hours of military training, Wang Ling lay down on the bed that he had gradually become familiar with. He fell asleep without even having time to talk to Uncle Hay. Obviously, he had no intention of leaving today. In the middle of the night, Wang Ling was having a sweet dream, but he was suddenly awakened by several rapid horn sounds, and then he heard the familiar voice of the instructor again, "Gather in 30 seconds, don't let me say anything again twice." In Wang Ling's mind, troops in the real world did have this habit during recruit training. They would gather late at night from time to time for assault training. Today he was very unlucky, and he really encountered this situation in the red alert world. There was no way Wang Ling and the others could only hurriedly pack up, hurriedly went out to assemble, and were led by the instructor to run for 2 kilometers before giving up. Not to mention, he was suddenly tortured like this in the middle of the night. When he returned to sleep, Wang Ling slept even more soundly. When he assembled early the next morning, he was a few seconds late and was punished with a set of push UPS. It was another brand new day. Just like yesterday, Wang Ling gritted his teeth and survived the whole day. His whole body was sore and swollen from exhaustion. Lying on the bed after 2 hours of night practice, Wang Ling took a long breath, and then finally shouted in his head, "Uncle Hay." Uncle Hay's response was also quick, "Tisk, tisk, it's rare, boy, to stay in the red alert world for so long. Wang Ling smiled bitterly, I'm almost exhausted. Let me go back first. After finishing speaking, Wang Ling's vision went dark and his mind was in a trance. When he opened his eyes again, he had already returned to the transfer station. Uncle Hay floated leisurely in front of him and counted up, this time you stayed in the red alert world for nearly 52 hours. Excluding the 15 hours of sleeping, you accumulated a total of 37 hours. Points. How about it, boy, do you want to convert all these 37 points into cash again? After getting along with him for such a period of time, Uncle Hay also knew Wang Ling's urinary properties. But this time, he thought wrong. Wang Ling shook his head and said, no, I will only exchange 7 points and keep the remaining 30 points. I also want to get 100 points as soon as possible, so I exchanged it for the enhancer and see if I can get rid of those guys from the first company. Ha ha ha, children can be taught, Uncle Hay smiled, obviously very satisfied with Wang Ling's change. After successfully redeeming the points, Wang Ling was too lazy to stay here any longer and immediately returned to reality. He has been working hard in the red alert world for so long, and he needs some time to rest. Wang Ling, what's wrong with you? Are you being beaten? In the real world, Wang Ling came to the classroom the next day and was immediately noticed by Dongfang Yuking, who couldn't help but ask again. Wang Ling stayed in the red alert world for so long this time. On the one hand, it was a challenge, and on the other hand, it was also because of the injuries on his face. The perverted Wang Ling of the system has a deep understanding of it, and he is afraid that he will also lose money in reality. Sure enough, in the past 2 days, although the injuries on his face faded somewhat, they still left many traces. As a result, he was successfully brought to the real world. Anyone with a discerning eye would know that he was beaten at a glance. Today, Red Alert World has started its first recommendation of creation. It has only been 10 chapters now. I am not shameless enough to ask for publicity. But friends who have recommendation votes, please vote for Red Alert World. Thank you very much. During this period of time, I have a lot of trivial matters at home, and I may be interrupted at any time while coding, and it will take a long time to get into the state. I cannot guarantee that I will update twice a day, but I will try my best. After all, during the recommendation period, I don't want to fall. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 16. Hey, don't touch it, it hurts. Wang Ling quickly grabbed Dongfang Yuking's hand and squeezed his eyes, which still had some dark circles, and then opened his eyes and started talking nonsense. Why did I get beaten? You dropped it yourself. Puff. They were not the only ones in the classroom. Many of the others couldn't hold back their words when they heard this. Which fool can believe what he said? Can you fall like this? The black and blue circles under his eyes that were obviously punched out seemed to be mocking him. Dongfang Yuking naturally didn't believe it, but for a moment she didn't know what to say to him. But Zhang Shenke on the side became angry. He slapped the desk with a bang and started shouting, Wang Ling, don't be such a coward. You don't dare to fight back when you are beaten. Are you still a man? To be honest, yes. Did Zhenglong beat him? I'll call Bowen right now to ask him to come back, and call a few more people to block him in the dormitory and beat him up. The Zhenglong he mentioned had a bad reputation in the school. In addition, he came to mock Wang Ling after the physical fitness test. Now that something happened to Wang Ling, Zhenglong was naturally the first to be suspected. But before Wang Ling could argue, someone not far away reminded him, don't be impulsive, brother. Zhenglong's brother is a gangster in this area. Even the school can't offend him. Don't be confused. Then Wang Ling was beaten in vain. Zhang Shen glared. At this time, Wang Ling hurriedly interrupted and said, "Okay, stop arguing, it wasn't him. Just stop participating. I will find this situation myself, and you can't help. Okay, we won't be needed anymore, and I'm too lazy to worry about it." Zhang Sheng spoke frankly, and his dissatisfaction was already revealed in his tone. Dongfang Yuking was calmer. "Wang Ling, don't resist on your own when something happens. Remember, there are still us." Wang Ling smiled bitterly and nodded, but in fact, they really couldn't help with this kind of thing. After reluctantly stopping the topic, the classroom became quiet. Soon after, the teacher arrived and the class began. Some people in the classroom took out their textbooks and some took out their mobile phones. The class time passed quickly. This time, Wang Ling's two roommates did not stay. After lunch, Wang Ling returned to the dormitory alone and lay on the bed tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. He was alone in the four-person room. Looking at the three bare beds, he felt a little lonely. After a few long sighs, this time Wang Ling did not wait for his body to fully recover before he contacted Uncle He and entered the world of Red Alert again. Although this world was simulated by a program, the feeling inside was very real. Although he was a little tired, with the company of his comrades, Wang Ling felt a little sense of security. Entering the world of Red Alert this time, the time was connected with the last time. The lights in the entire barracks were turned off, and almost everyone was resting on the beds in the tent. Knowing that there were still arduous training tasks during the day, Wang Ling didn't think much about it. After calming down, he quickly fell asleep. The next day, he was still woken up by 3 whistles, followed by the instructor's call to assemble. He hurriedly cleaned up and started his morning run after gathering. This day's training kicked off. The training program was the same as before in the morning, but after the gathering in the afternoon, the instructor took them to the shooting range, and each person was issued a submachine gun. This type of submachine gun is a proprietary firearm used by soldiers mobilized in Red Alert. It is called the PPSH-41 submachine gun, also known as the Babisha submachine gun. People who have played Red Alert actually know that the firepower of conscripts, or the firepower of this kind of Babisha submachine gun, is really not flattering compared to other arms, but Wang Ling, whether in the real world or the game world, this is the first time I have personally come into contact with firearms. In addition to a little excitement, there is also a lot of fear in my heart. According to the rules, when they got firearms for the first time, they needed to practice shooting to test their sights. After the personnel were arranged, the instructor first explained and demonstrated. He hit the bull's-eye with all 5 shots of the 5-ring target. Everyone in the 5th company couldn't help but cheer. "It's your turn next, No 001, you go first." It was Wang Ling's turn. No 001 used the submachine gun for a while. After mastering the shooting method, he fired 5 shots at the target 100 meters away. After the shooting, the instructor took a look and said, "1 shot, 2 rings, 2 shots and 1 ring, 2 shots missed the target. This is the first time I picked up a submachine gun, and the results are not bad." Next, No 002. There are no requirements for this test, and there are no dedicated reading personnel other than instructors. It needs to be carried out in sequence, which naturally takes some time. While waiting, number 102 next to Wang Ling smiled proudly at Wang Ling. "Brother, I have shotguns since I was a child. This is my specialty. I will look at you later." Wang Ling was a little dumbfounded. To be honest, he didn't pay attention to the results of number 102, he was just worrying about himself. After all, this was his first time shooting. Although there were enough people, each person only fired 5 shots. Overall, the speed was not too slow. After waiting for a while, it was finally Wang Ling's turn. He had never eaten pork, but he had still seen pigs running around. Wang Ling had already become familiar with the Bosch's submachine gun during the waiting time, and now he naturally put his finger on the trigger. Holding his breath and concentrating, with his eyes shining, Wang Ling located the bullseye and fired 5 shots in a row. Result: they all missed the target. Kid, you have set a record for our company again. We will strengthen training in the future. No 102, the instructor said calmly. That's right, they all missed the target. Wang Ling's 5 shots didn't hit even one. Although it was easy to see other comrades hitting the target with at least 1 shot, it was only after testing it myself that I realized how difficult it was. Not to mention the unfamiliarity of the control, the unimaginable recoil alone left Wang Ling at a loss. With an annoyed sigh, Wang Ling focused on number 102 as the instructor shouted. Since he dared to blow this number 102, he naturally had a certain confidence. He smiled confidently, put on a very standard and handsome shooting posture and fired 5 shots in a row. When the instructor saw the target, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. 3 shots with 5 rings, 1 shot with 4 rings, 1 shot with 3 rings. Kid, your sights are good, but your eyesight is not good. This time's results will be invalid. Ah. Why, instructor, number 102 was unconvinced. At this time, Wang Ling couldn't help but said, brother, why are you hitting my target so well? Ha ha ha. The others were holding back their laughter, but when they heard Wang Ling's voice, they finally couldn't help but burst into laughter. And the instructor rarely reprimanded them. Yes, number 102 made a joke this time. All 5 shots hit Wang Ling's target. No matter how accurate they were, it was not his result. After all, this cannot be entirely blamed on number 102. Who made Wang Ling miss all the targets and leave one intact target? Number 102 was overconfident, and according to the sequence, he just saw the wrong target. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 17. Originally, No 102's shooting score was excellent, but without Wang Ling's help, it was reduced to 0 points. Speaking of which, number 102 was quite unfair. After laughing enough, the test started again at number 103. The 5th recruit company has a total of 150 recruits. The remaining nearly 50 people were all tested quickly. The instructor roughly ranked the results. Wang Ling and number 102 deservedly ranked at the bottom. It's okay for Wang Ling here, after all, he won the last place based on his strength, but the look on No 102's face was as bad as possible, as if many people owed him money. Boom. After the rankings were completed and the 5th company was gathering, there was a sudden roar not far away. Wang Ling trembled in fright. He turned around and saw that a group of people were surrounding the anti-aircraft infantry shooting range in the distance, busy with their hands. I don't know what my feet are doing. Just when Wang Ling was wondering, this group of people had already used a stretcher to carry out an injured anti-aircraft infantryman. There was even an exploded gun barrel next to him. Not only Wang Ling, but everyone else in the 5th company was also confused when they saw this scene. The instructor explained in time, the chamber exploded. This is because the air defense recruit did not operate properly and the chamber exploded. Exploded chamber. Upon hearing this word, many people in the team became uneasy. Looking at the bloody air defense soldier on the stretcher, the excitement they had just come into contact with firearms was suddenly swept away. These are arms and firearms, dangerous items. If things go wrong, people will be killed. However, Wang Ling is an exception. This is a virtual game world, and he doesn't care much about what others are worried about. The instructor glanced at the team, snorted, and then continued, "Why, are you scared now? Where are you now? On the battlefield, life and death are uncertain. One day in the future, when you join the battlefield, you may see people around you at any time. If your comrades die in battle, the one who dies in the next second may be you. When talking about this topic, the instructor's eyes turned red. This battlefield veteran has obviously experienced too many similar things. After a pause, the instructor continued, "Don't forget, you are a soldier, a future mobilizer. Sooner or later, you will join the battlefield. Every extra point of training in the training camp will lead to more soldiers on the battlefield. What are the chances of survival?" After a lot of back and forth, it turned to training again. The instructor's intentions can be described as good. After these words, almost everyone in the 5th Recruit Company gritted their teeth, and the heavy pressure on their hearts quietly turned into a strong motivation for training. Day by day, compared to the loneliness in the real world, Wang Ling gradually fell in love with the military life in the Red Alert world, and his visits became more frequent. After adjusting his biological clock several times, Wang Ling also gradually figured out the rules for his entry into the Red Alert world. Each time, he returned to the real world before falling asleep in the Red Alert world, and entered the Red Alert world before falling asleep in the real world, and the cycle continued. Wang Ling became more and more accustomed to this rhythm. Over the past few days, the training intensity of Wang Ling's 5th Recruit Company has continued unabated. The first company of the specialized school team has even increased training, and even the morning run has gradually increased to 5 kilometers. At the beginning, Wang Ling was still complaining, but after these days of training, his physical fitness continued to strengthen, and after gritting his teeth several times, he finally adapted to this rhythm. In the past few days, the 5th Company's training programs have become more and more comprehensive, and various cross-country and drill activities have come one after another. It is increasingly difficult for Wang Ling to distinguish whether this is reality or a game. The same thing happened during this period. The 5th Company and the 1st Company had another group fight. Wang Ling also participated, but it was no longer the trigger. As for what the reason was, he didn't bother to worry about it. He would be beaten sooner or later anyway. However, this result was a bit embarrassing, almost ending in a complete defeat. After all, this first company of recruits had joined the army nearly a month earlier than them, and their physical fitness was far beyond what they could make up for through overtime training. For this reason, the 5th instructor's face darkened for several days, and he threatened to regain this place collectively next time. The most important thing is points. After staying in the Red Alert world for so long, Wang Ling would exchange some cash every time. All the remaining points have been accumulated. Now he has a full 90 points, which is far away from Uncle He. The basic physical fitness enhancer mentioned in the mouth is only 10 points away. Accustomed to the rhythm of the Red Alert world, these 10 hours were very easy for Wang Ling. Thinking of this, Wang Ling couldn't help but get excited. Boy, according to your past habits, after coming out this time, you have almost accumulated 100 points. A leap in strengthening is just around the corner. What do you think? That night, Wang Ling entered the system as a habit. At the transfer station, Uncle He asked him with a smile. But Wang Ling didn't have the time to answer. "Stop talking nonsense, Uncle He, let me in quickly." Uncle He smiled. "You kid, you are quite anxious." After saying that, the door connecting the two worlds finally opened again, and Wang Lingting walked straight in. With a familiar trance in his mind, when he opened his eyes again, Wang Ling was already lying on the bed in the military camp, and snoring could be heard from time to time from other comrades. Naturally, it is inevitable that there will be some peculiar smell coming from a house of grown men. Wang Ling was already used to these things and had long since become accustomed to them. He smiled, closed his eyes and fell asleep. I thought that today would be like usual. I would be woken up by the sound of the bugle and rush to assemble. Unfortunately, there was a surprise training in the middle of the night and there was an emergency gathering. But unexpectedly, something unexpected happened today. In the middle of the night, It was Uncle He who woke up Wang Ling. "Hey, wake up, kid, you have a call. Wake up, wake up." Wang Ling had been in the red alert world for so long that he was very sensitive to the sound of the horn, but he was very resistant to ordinary calls. Uncle He called him for a long time before he woke up. Although he didn't like being woken up in the middle of the night, he was used to being woken up, and Wang Ling had long since lost the energy to wake up. After waking up and hearing Uncle He's words, Wang Ling stretched out helplessly, skipped the transfer station and returned to the real world. He casually picked up his cell phone and looked at it. It turned out that the call was from his roommate Zhang Shenke. The call came at around 11 o'clock in the evening, and Wang Ling suddenly felt an ominous premonition. After picking up the phone, Zhang Shenke asked directly, "Hey, Wang Ling, are you sleeping?" Wang Ling replied in a daze, "I just fell asleep, what's wrong?" "Oh, don't sleep, come to the second provincial hospital quickly, something happened to Yuking. I am ashamed to say that I only wrote less than one chapter yesterday, and the number of saved manuscripts is in negative growth. The weather is hot, and there are a lot of trivial matters at home. I want to use old books to advertise new books, but I can't publish new chapters. It's like Mercury is severely retrograde. No matter what, I have to work harder today and write as much as I can. The second update will be at 10 o'clock. At the same time, I would also like to thank Sister Dan, Yu Sheng, and Xiao Yao for their rewards." Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 18. Something happened to Yuking. What happened to him? As soon as he heard the news, Wang Ling lost all sleep in an instant, and his body bounced up as if there were springs on it. On the other end of the phone, Zhang Shenke was also very impatient. There was a car accident. Now he is sent to the emergency room and pushed to the operating room. His partner is guarding him. Bowen and I are also rushing there. You should go too. Almost there. After saying that, Wang Ling immediately hung up the phone and got dressed. In the red alert world, almost every time he wakes up, he is in an emergency gathering state, and everything has to be sorted out within 30 seconds. Accustomed to this rhythm, Wang Ling also moves very quickly in real life. He is dressed in less than 10 seconds, even the bedding. I rushed out of the dormitory before I had time to clean up. But when he was about to leave, Wang Ling hesitated for a moment, gritted his teeth, turned around and found his bank card and 2,000 yuan in cash, so he was prepared. It was midnight, and there were no buses for a long time. Wang Ling rushed out of school and stopped a taxi on the roadside, and hurried to the second provincial hospital in a hurry. Their school was quite far from the city, and Wang Ling kept urging the driver halfway through. Fortunately, there were not many vehicles in the middle of the night and there was no traffic jam. The driver simply relaxed his speed and arrived at the second provincial hospital an hour later. After confirming the location by phone, Wang Ling hurriedly searched for the emergency department and found Dongfang Yuking lying on the bed in the corresponding ward. His target, Sun Tongtong, and Wei Bowen and Zhang Shenke, who arrived later, were also in the hospital. Watching from the side. Within an hour, the operation was completed. After looking at them, Wang Ling asked, "What's going on? Why was there a car accident when Yu Qing was fine?" The first person to answer was Wei Bowen. She is still in a coma, but a doctor has just come to inform her that Yuking's life is not in danger, and her injuries are not too serious. After waking up, she will be hospitalized for a week and will be discharged. After hearing the news, Wang Ling finally breathed a sigh of relief, pulled a bench aside and sat down. At this time, Sun Tongtong also intervened. The two of us went out for a late-night snack. When we were crossing the intersection, we clearly saw that the light was green and walked over, but a red car happened to get in the way and knocked Yuking away. I was so frightened that I quickly called the emergency number, and then called Bowen using Yuking's mobile phone. This Sun Tongtong is also a classmate of Wang Ling's department, but she is not in the same major. She is tall and beautiful, a department beauty with high vision. She has rejected many suitors, but in the end she was unable to withstand Dong Fangyuking's money. Offensive. As for what happened after the car accident, Wang Ling almost knew it. Wei Bowen informed Zhang Shenke, who in turn notified Wang Ling. As a result, the four people who would not have gathered together easily ended up gathering together in the ward in the middle of the night. It was hard to avoid talking about it. People sigh. Zhang Shenke and Wei Bowen had understood these causes and consequences in advance, and they did not comment on anything now. Only Wang Ling was a little angry. What about the driver who caused the accident? A few of us are here, but no one caused trouble, so he escaped. At this point, Wei Bowen also looked angry. Tell me, who is this? Zhang Shenke frowned. Come on, the police have been called anyway, and he will be arrested and jailed sooner or later. The most important thing now is Yu Qing, and this guy doesn't know how long he will be unconscious. That's right. Wang Ling nodded and looked at Dong Fangyuking, whose eyes were always closed on the hospital bed, and couldn't help but sigh. Clang clang clang. At this time, someone suddenly knocked on the door outside. When he opened it, it turned out to be the nurse on duty, Dong Fangyuking, right? Are you all his family members? We are his roommates, Wang Ling replied. The nurse glanced at them and then stated her purpose. Which one of you will pay for Dong Fangyuking's hospitalization expenses? It turned out that they were asking for money. When Wang Ling and the others heard about it, they realized that this was a hospital, not a charity. However, the question arises, who can pay this money? For a moment, the atmosphere in the ward became a little awkward. Several people looked at each other, not knowing what to say. After some time, the nurse asked again, who will pay? Wei Bowen started to discuss, can we pay it later? The patient has money, but we don't have that much money. The nurse looked embarrassed. How about you guys join us first? Forget it, I'll pay the money at this time, Wang Ling finally spoke. Although both Zhang Shenke and Wei Bowen are working, whether their income is enough to cover their own expenses is a question. The hospitalization expenses are really a heavy burden for them. Zhang Shenke was also a little embarrassed. Do you have that much money? Let's pool it together. Wang Ling shook his head calmly. No need, I recently made some money by speculating on some virtual currencies. After answering, Wang Ling immediately shouted in his head, Uncle He, all my 90 points should be converted into cash. Uncle He has always been paying attention to the development of the situation. As soon as he heard Wang Ling's request, he immediately became anxious. Boy, are you kidding me? I am only 10 points away from redeeming the enhancer. A leap in growth is here in front of me, why are you suddenly wasting your money? Wang Ling was not to be outdone. If the points are gone, you can still earn more, and there is no need to be in such a hurry for the boosters, but now we need money. It is not easy for both of them to make money, so I will pay for it. Uncle He was still not happy. It's not easy for them too, is it easy for you? Think about how hard you have been in the boot camp these days, how many times you have been exhausted, how many times you have gritted your teeth and persevered, and how much energy you have wasted to save up these points. If it were an ordinary artificial intelligence brain, it would probably simply execute orders, but who allowed Uncle He to have personality and emotions? Wang Ling didn't hesitate at all and immediately answered in his mind, Uncle He, just like those comrades in the Red Alert world. Although Yuking and I have been together for less than a year, I attach great importance to these emotions. Later it's just a booster, it's not a big deal, the most I can do is work harder and stay in the Red Alert world for a longer time. Uncle He in the system's special station was stunned for a moment. It seemed that it was the first time he had come into contact with Wang Ling's temperament, and the first time he had heard these real-life emotions. His original Gujing Weibo program also began to have some problems. A little touched. After being stunned for a while, Uncle He finally chose to compromise. With a sigh, he transferred all 9,000 yuan in cash to Wang Ling's account. As for reality, Zhang Shenke and the other three hesitated slightly after hearing Wang Ling's words, but finally reluctantly agreed to Wang Ling's approach. After the remittance information arrived, Wang Ling left the ward with the nurse and paid all Dongfang Yuking's hospitalization fees, medical fees, and other expenses, spending nearly 10,000 yuan in one go. According to the nurse, there may be expenses for subsequent treatment, but that is not Wang Ling's consideration. Dongfang Yuking should be awake by then. Don't call Wang Ling stupid, it's just that people who are too smart are hard to get along with. As for basic enhancers, there are some, and the points required for redemption may be a bit special. You can guess in advance. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 19. Originally, with these points as a guarantee, Wang Ling could be regarded as an invisible tycoon, but now that he has paid the fee, he feels like he has returned to before liberation overnight. He looked back at the Red Cross not far away, feeling a little mixed in his heart. When they returned to the ward, Zhang Shenke and the three of them were still waiting, looking a little worried. Wei Bowen went straight to the point and asked, "Wang Ling, do you have enough money?" Wang Ling nodded and said with a smile, "That's enough, I'll give you some extra pocket money." The three people felt more relieved now, and Sun Tongtong said with relief, "When Yuking is discharged from the hospital, I will ask him to return the money to you in double the amount. Don't be so exaggerated. If you want to pay it back, just give me the original price." Wang Ling waved his hand, and the topic was stopped for the time being. The time now is past 12 o'clock in the morning. Although this time is not too late for Wang Ling and the others, who has given up the matter of Dongfang Yuking. They are busy with work, and now everyone is sleepy. Fortunately, this was a three-person ward that Sun Tongtong specially asked the doctor to open. There were 2 empty beds available. The 4 of them briefly discussed it and decided that Sun Tongtong and Zhang Shenke would sleep on the bed, while Wang Ling and Wei Bowen borrowed some chairs. Built 2 hard beds, which was enough for the night. Relatively speaking, Wang Ling is quite energetic here. After all, he has been sleeping in the Red Alert world for a while. Now he is lying on the chair, tossing and turning for a while, but still unable to fall asleep. At this time, Wei Bowen on the side suddenly asked quietly, "Wang Ling, what's wrong with you recently? It feels like you are a little different from before." "Huh?" Wang Ling was puzzled, "Why do you say that?" Wei Bowen pondered for a while, and then said, "How should I put it? It seems that I am more confident, more free and easy, and I feel like I am walking with wind." "What kind of evaluation is this?" "What was I like before?" Wang Ling asked with a smile. Wei Bowen coughed and said, "In the past, it wasn't anything, I just kind of followed my heart." "From your heart? Just cowardly. Dot. Ha ha ha, just think I didn't say it." "Go to sleep." After Wei Bowen finished speaking, he turned around and there was no movement immediately. But Wang Ling was dumbfounded. This roommate was so cute. But having said that, if Wei Bowen hadn't reminded him, Wang Ling wouldn't have noticed these changes in himself. The experience in the Red Alert world had a really great impact on him. After practicing in the Red Alert world for so long, Wang Ling was almost used to the routine of the army. Early in the morning, at dawn, he woke up naturally even without hearing the instructor's whistle and muster order. However, he was not in a hurry to get up. He stayed in a daze for a moment and looked at his roommates who were still sleeping. After a while, he got up and got dressed. He went out and ran along a street for more than 10 minutes. bought breakfast for 5 people after returning, and then returned to the ward. After Wang Ling returned, Zhang Shenke and the others had woken up, and Dongfang looking on the hospital bed had also opened her eyes. She was holding her plastered arm and wailing, "It hurts. It hurts." Wang Ling was happy when he saw it. "You kid, you finally woke up, but why do you cry for father and mother as soon as you wake up?" Dongfang looking immediately complained, "Shit. You're just crying for father and mother, and it hurts me. That bastard car hit me so hard, my arms were split, and my head is still dizzy." Wang Ling shook his head and did not answer. He just handed the breakfast to them respectively. After Zhang Sheng took the breakfast, he began to retort, "Come on, looking, just be satisfied. If there was a car accident, your result would have been very light. If the collision was too hard, you would have passed. We won't even look at you for the last time, not even. Bah! You're not cursing me." Dongfang looking was unhappy, but before he could say anything else, Sun Tong Tong stuffed a pancake into his mouth and blocked his mouth. Now that the boy was awake and seemed to be full of energy and no problem, Wang Ling and the others were relieved. After breakfast, Zhang Shenke and Wei Bowen rushed to the unit to go to work. Wang Ling stayed with him until noon and said goodbye to the hospital before leaving. "I promised to come back often in the future." Back at school and in the empty dormitory, Wang Ling lay on the bed and took a deep breath. After resting for a while, he got up and went to the teaching building. Wang Ling is alone on weekdays. Dongfang Yuking's accident does not have a great impact on him in the real world. During this day, he should go to class, rest and have fun. It will soon be evening. Wang Ling was lying on the bed, and he contacted Uncle He out of habit and entered the system transfer station. However, Uncle He seemed to be still angry. When he saw Wang Ling, he rolled his eyes. "Boy, do you regret it? Why do you regret it? 90 points. This number of points may be dispensable to you later, but it is very important to you now. You can redeem them all at once and feel penniless." "Okay, it turned out that I was still struggling with this matter." Wang Ling smiled and said nothing, but Uncle He said, "The exchange system is one-sided. Points can be exchanged for money, but you can't exchange points back if you have money. Your roommate will return the money to you sooner or later. Let's put it together in the first place. Isn't it great?" "Okay, Uncle He, don't mention this matter again. It's too long-winded." "Open the door," Wang Ling sighed, not wanting to mention it too much. After entering the world of Red Alert, Wang Ling was surrounded by darkness and snoring. The last time he left the Red Alert world, he left temporarily after receiving a call. Now that he is back, it is naturally connected to the last time. It's still late at night in the Red Alert world. After turning over, Wang Ling was stunned for a while, then closed his eyes and planned to fall asleep as soon as possible. This Red Alert world is extremely unrealistic. Everyday training is very demanding. If you don't keep your spirits up, the devil instructor will not be lenient. Drop. 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 Gather in 30 seconds, don't make me say it a second time. However, just as Wang Ling closed his eyes, the familiar horn sound and assembly call came from outside the tent, and the sleeping people immediately ejected as if cold water had been poured on them. There was no other way, Wang Ling sighed, and could only follow along and get busy. After gathering, they ran for 3 kilometers in a row before disbanding and falling asleep again. Since then, Wang Ling's life has returned to its original trajectory. After gathering in the morning, he will start a day of training, return to the real world before going to bed at night, and then go back to the Red Alert world before going to bed at night. Now Wang Ling can be said to have just missed the strengthening agent, and everything has to be accumulated from scratch. It happened that during this period, the 5th recruit company and the 1st recruit company were in tit for tat. The workload was increasing everywhere, and various training and exercise tasks were also coming one after another. Even the 5-kilometer morning jog was set at 20 minutes. It can be said that Wang Ling was exhausted from running every day without finishing the run. However, Wang Ling also knew what he had given up. In all this, he never once said bitter or tired. Uncle He, on the other hand, was always watching Wang Ling's every move, his face expressionless, but his eyes were very dull, and it was impossible to tell what he was thinking. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 20. 1. Ha. 2. Ha. Dot. In the 5th recruit company, because of the 1st recruit company on the pole, the training is increased every day. The military marching boxing practice in the evening has never been missed, and today is no exception. Wang Ling has been in the Red Alert world for so long, and has become more and more accustomed to the rhythm and atmosphere here. In the square team, Wang Ling punches powerfully, is vigorous, and shouts loudly. It is completely different from the state when he first entered the Red Alert world. If two people. I don't know if it was Uncle He's special setting. The 5th instructor was paying attention to Wang Ling almost all the time. Naturally, he also witnessed Wang Ling's changes throughout the process. The comparison between the before and after made the instructor's face rarely show a little relief. Ha! Ha! The military marching boxing was still going on, and almost everyone in the 5th company was shouting hysterically, paying no attention to the sweat that soaked their clothes and rolled to the ground. Finally, the 2-hour military march ended, and the team disbanded after the instructor gave the order. Wang Ling quickly returned to the tent with his comrades, took the time to clean up and wash up, then lay down on the bed, closed his eyes and returned to the real world. 4 days have passed since Dongfang Yuking's accident. Wang Ling has not been idle during these 4 days. He travels between the real and virtual worlds every day. While exercising, he is also accumulating energy again. Integral. Up to now, excluding some subsequent exchanges, Wang Ling has accumulated nearly 40 points. Wang Ling was quite satisfied with this number of points, but Uncle He was very critical, saying that Wang Ling's use of 90 points was too wasteful. Wang Ling was already used to this, so he simply put it in his left ear and out in the right ear. In the real world, after sleeping soundly all night, Wang Ling got up the next day, washed up, had breakfast, and took a taxi directly to the 2nd Provincial Hospital. This was the news he received yesterday. In the past 4 days, Dongfang Yuking's recovery was much better than expected. As a result, the hospital began to discharge patients in advance. Today is the day Dongfang Yuking is discharged from the hospital. By the time Wang Ling arrived, Zhang Shenke, Wei Bowen and Sun Tongtong had already gone through the discharge procedures at the hospital. After a series of troublesome procedures, the 4 of them finally accompanied Dongfang Yuking and left the hospital. Although he is recovering well, after all, he has been injured for 100 days. Dongfang Yuking is still wearing a plaster on his left arm and has a bandage hanging around his neck. At first glance, he looks like a seriously injured person. The 5 of them took a commercial taxi and drove directly to the school, where they packed Dongfang Yuking into the dormitory. This was Wei Bowen's suggestion. The 2 of them had also asked for leave in the past few days, so they simply asked Dongfang Yuking to return to school and live together for a while so that they could take care of her. The school's supervision is not strict. Sun Tongtong can live in Wang Ling's dormitory, but this girl still can't let go. During the day, she can take care of Dongfang Yuking here. At night, she returns to her dormitory, which attracts Dongfang Yuking kept complaining, "Why can't I let go? Anyway, I live in the upper bunk. If the mosquito net is pulled up, can you guys still peek in?" As a result, Wang Ling and the others had laughed enough, and Zhang Shenke immediately said sarcastically, "Your arms are like this, and you are still thinking about having sex." Wei Bowen also joked, Isn't your right hand fine? Let's just make do with it. Wang Ling, however, was more practical and asked directly, how about I go to her dormitory and call her here and there? Which dormitory does she live in? Dongfang Yuking could roll his eyes at the two of them, but Wang Ling shocked him, no, 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 you are my brother, I just said it casually, please don't embarrass me, okay. Wang Ling spread his hands and was too lazy to talk to him. After settling down, Dongfang Yuking did not default on the debt and directly returned the hospitalization fee to Wang Ling. For this wealthy man, these expenses are nothing. After receiving the funds, Wang Ling smiled and didn't think anything of it. On the contrary, Uncle Hay in the interdimensional system transfer station sighed, 90 points. Wang Ling became a little impatient and responded in his head, Uncle Hay, can you please stop being such a bitch? You keep insisting on this matter. Uncle Hay was speechless. The dormitory became lively again, and Wang Ling couldn't help but feel a little more at ease in his heart. The four of them chatted and played games together until 2 o'clock in the morning before falling asleep one after another. Lying on the bed, Wang Ling originally did not intend to enter the world of Red Alert again, but after tossing and turning, he always felt that something was missing and could not fall asleep. In the end, he contacted Uncle Hay and re-entered the world of Red Alert. Oddly enough, he seemed to be used to the rhythm of the two worlds. Lying on the hard bed in the military camp, listening to the snoring of his comrades, Wang Ling closed his eyes and fell asleep soon after. The speed of time in this Red Alert world is 10 times that of the real world. Wang Ling was not in a hurry to go back. He practiced all day in the training camp the next day and finished the military training in the evening. After preparations were completed, this is the return. Lying on the bed in the school dormitory and looking at the 3 sleeping roommates, Wang Ling couldn't help but laugh. This time difference is really convenient if you make use of it, so you won't waste any time. After saying that, Wang Ling closed his eyes and quickly fell asleep. The next day, Wang Ling woke up early, jogged on the school playground for more than 10 minutes, and then returned after buying 4 breakfasts. In the dormitory, Sun Tongtong had already arrived, but Dongfang Yuking and the 3 of them were still sleeping in. Wang Ling spread his hands and said there was nothing he could do. Sun Tongtong brought a separate breakfast to Dongfang Yuking. Wang Ling simply ate 2 portions by himself, then turned on the computer and started playing games. This day happened to be Saturday, and the school was on holiday, so Wang Ling didn't think about going to class. After the other 3 people woke up one after another, after breakfast, the 4 of them, together with Sun Tongtong, played games together all morning. After lunch, they rested for a while and then went out to a nearby park together. They played all afternoon and had dinner together in the evening. We went back to school together after eating skewers. After a hard day, although he was not as tired as in the Red Alert world, Wang Ling was lying on the bed, but he was also a little tired. Instead of staying up late playing games with the 3 of them, he contacted Uncle Hay and went to Red Alert again. Police world, fell asleep. When he woke up the next day, Wang Ling thought that today would be the same as before, with a whole day of training. However, he did not expect that today's Red Alert world would be a little more lively. The 5th recruit company actually took the initiative to challenge the 1st recruit company. The specific reason seemed to be that the 2 instructors had turned against each other and were betting with their subordinates. Although this reason was a bit weird, Wang Ling and the others didn't complain. After all, they were old enemies. If they could take the opportunity to beat them up, why not? Of course, the prerequisite is that you can beat others. During recruit training, it is somewhat boring, and if you don't grow up, and if there is a conflict, you will be slapped in the face, so I speeded up some progress in the early stage intentionally or unintentionally. However, as of now, it is probably about the same now, we can usher in the first climax of another dimension.